The first meeting is really a get-to-know-you meeting. We're going to sit down. Typically, the meeting will last about an hour. We're having a conversation. My job is to ask them some questions about where they are, what some of their goals are, what some of the key objectives they have in meeting with me, where they are to this point, and really what brought them in to see me. And now I'm at the point in my career where I have a lot of people that are dependent upon me to provide them with all the guidance and all the advice that we do on a day-to-day basis.
You spend your working years trying to build up your assets, trying to build up pension credits at your job, trying to grow your nest egg so that you can one day retire when you can't work or don't want to work anymore. And that's a period followed by phase two, which is retirement. And your priorities in these two phases are very different, but many times we see people don't make that shift and they still act like they're in phase one when they really should be acting like they're in phase two.
We're going to talk to you about what we commonly refer to as the second half of the game. And what I mean by that is you're working your entire life towards retirement, and I'm assuming that most of you are, at that age where you're starting to consider some of your options as you move into retirement. And as you do that, you're moving from what we call the accumulation phase of your life, where you're accumulating your assets. Maybe you're participating in your company's 401k, maybe you're contributing to an IRA account or a Roth IRA account or some type of retirement vehicle. And now, as you retire, you're transitioning into the distribution phase, or the part where you're going to need income in retirement. So we're going to talk about some different ways to do that with an emphasis on Social Security.
Hello, and welcome to Financially Speaking with Jeff Bush. My name is Barry Warnker, and I'm the host of today's show. Today we're going to be talking about the 9 401k mistakes that you want to avoid. And here to discuss those 401k mistakes is my partner, Jeff Bush.
Well, hello, Barry, and welcome to the show. Our goal today is to help you avoid making costly mistakes with your old 401k. And of course, today's retirement is very different than your father's retirement. This is not your father's retirement. Most people today that retire aren't retiring with a pension, or maybe they're retiring with a small pension, but a lot of people are retiring with a 401k. So when we say old, we mean that you leave your employer and now you have a portable 401k. And for many Americans, this is their biggest asset. And why is this? Well, pension plans are becoming rare. Last 25 years, there's been a huge decline in the number of pensions. A lot of companies are doing away with them. And there's much debate about the viability of the Social Security system, which we've talked about in prior shows. So what does this mean to the consumer? And it means handle your 401k with care. It could be the main source or your only source of income during retirement. So let's avoid these critical mistakes in your 401k. And we're going to offer a free report today, and it's called the 9 401k mistakes to avoid. And to get a copy of this report, we want you to give us a call or send me an email, and we'll get that report out to you. So it's called the 9 401k mistakes to avoid.
It's really a worthwhile report, so take advantage of that. It's free and it's good information. Well, let's get right down to it. The first mistake that people make, and it's just like that song I used to sing back in the day, take the money and run. They see that money on the table and they take it out and run. And what's the downside of that?
Well, this is probably the biggest mistake that particularly many younger investors make, as they simply cash out their 401k and spend the money when they leave employers. So people leave employers all the time, and when they do, their 401k becomes portable, and many people just cash the 401k out, and they justify it by saying, oh, I can use this money to pay off debt, I can put a roof on the house, I can take a dream vacation. You know, they have cash to spend. The problem is that they're robbing themselves of future retirement income. Plus they're likely paying, they're going to pay taxes on it, and if you're under 59 and a half, you're going to pay penalties on it as well.
And it's a particularly tough thing because if the reason their 401ks become portable is because they lost their job and don't have another one yet, then they can be feeling pretty desperate. But now we would urge them, unless that's the only option you have left, try to find another way to not take that 401k money and just spend it and lose that asset and lose a good part of your future. So if you can, assuming you can resist the urge to just spend the money, you can do something. You can move the money and not spend it. So mistake number 2 we're going to talk about is leaving your money with your old 401k employer when you move on. So now, is that a problem?
Yeah, it is. There's actually a couple reasons why this can be problematic, Barry. First of all, you run the risk of giving up control. The old plan may change investment providers or investment options, whether you like it or not. I mean, it's a 401k plan. It has a plan document, and you're sort of, you know, at the mercy of those rules. You're at the mercy of what your employer, the plan document says. So your 401k has certain rules that are governed by what we call the plan document, and the most common concern here may be the lack of an option for your beneficiaries to stretch your 401k, which is a strategy to spread the tax burden of an inheritance over a lifetime. So this is, you know, of all the things that we talk about today, this is probably one of the most important, and that is when you, let's say, Barry, you have a 401k and you've named your son as the beneficiary, and you pass away and now your son inherits your 401k. Well, your son is a young man. Let's say your son's 30 years old. If he doesn't have the option to do the stretch, he's going to take that distribution and pay taxes on it in the year he takes the distribution. If he has the ability to do what we call a stretch out IRA, he can stretch those payments and therefore stretch the tax liability out over his lifetime. And a lot of the 401k plans, particularly the older ones, don't allow you to do that. So that's, you know, another reason why you would want to move that into another retirement account, an IRA. Plus, people tend to forget about their old plans. Worse yet, should you pass away, beneficiaries may not even realize that you had a 401k plan. So it's generally not a good idea to keep it in an old.
We've seen that in our practice where sometimes people, because they change jobs a number of times, and maybe we meet them when they're 50 or 60 years old, they've got a long list of all these different accounts, and again, it's very hard for them to manage them because each of the 401k plans might have different rules and different investments, and it gets to be a mess rather than an asset that you can really make the most of. So that's vital then you don't want to leave your that 401k with the old employer, because again, it was really a holding place where they could dump money in as you were working. Well, you're not dumping any more money into that 401k. You want to put it in the best possible investment. And if you do roll it over into an IRA, which we'll talk about in a minute, that's going to give you a world of options of how to invest that money instead of a limited menu. So mistake number 3, which kind of leads into this, is if you do decide to roll over your 401k or transfer your 401k, what are the mistakes that come into play there that we see?
Well, mistake number 3 is executing a rollover instead of a direct transfer. Now, when you look at that, you might think, well, isn't that the same thing? And the answer is no, it's not the same thing. So executing a rollover, that means that the plan is actually writing, they're writing a check made payable to you, okay, as opposed to a direct transfer where they're making the funds payable to the new institution or the new custodian. The reason why that is so important, it really comes down to, well, it comes down to two things. It comes down to taxes, and it comes down to the 60-day rule. So let's talk about the 60-day rule. With the 60-day rule, when they write you a check, and banks are notorious for this. Of course, banks normally aren't holding a 401k plan, but if it's an IRA, the same rules apply. They want to write you a check. If they write you a check, the clock starts ticking, and you have 60 days to open up a new account and get that money into a new IRA account to avoid being taxed or penalized on it. It's called the 60-day rollover rule. So if you do a direct transfer, you don't have to worry about that. So in other words, if you tell your 401k plan, let's say that you open up an IRA with a new custodian. Let's call it ABC Investment Company, and you just tell your previous 401k plan to make this check payable to ABC Investment Plan. That's called a direct transfer. So that's the best way to do it because you don't take constructive receipt of the funds. They just simply get transferred over to the new custodian, and everybody's happy. If they're making, so the other problem, Barry, is if they're making the check payable to you, then they're withholding taxes. So they're going to withhold 20% of taxes because they don't know what you're going to do with the money. They don't know that you're going to take that and now open up a new IRA. So they're required to withhold taxes from that distribution. So if let's say you have $100,000 in your 401k, well, they're going to write you a check for $80,000. They're going to take $100 and they're going to send $20,000 to Washington, and they're going to send you a check for $80,000. Well, now, so for you not to have any of this as a taxable event, you have to take that $100,000 and open up the new account. So you got to find $20,000 to make up that difference. If you don't, that difference is going to become taxable. So you want to avoid that.
Wow. Yeah, and it's just a simple thing. Just remember, all you got to do is don't have the check made to yourself. Have the check made out to the institution that you're investing with, the custodian, the brokerage company, whatever it is, and that way they won't have to withhold that 20%.
Yeah, a lot of times you just have to be forceful with that. Like we've done a million of these, and usually right on the form it'll say that you want to do a direct transfer. But sometimes, I've seen it where the company just wants to make it easy. Oh yeah, we'll just make the check payable to you. Don't do that. Don't do that. Have them make the check pay. Because they might want to do it because, oh, you don't have the account set up yet, or we just want to, we're just going to make the check out to you. It's our policy. That's not the way you want it done. You want to force the company, the 401k company, to make the check payable to the new custodian.
Well, that's, I think, one area where we shine is that we will go to bat for our clients and to push it to make sure the company does it the right way. Because sometimes people are intimidated if that transferring company says, "Oh, this is the way we do it." We know that generally you can make it happen.
There's a million horror stories out there, and usually you don't just even know that this happened until you get the surprise 1099 in the mail, and then all of a sudden you figure out. I remember this happening a couple years ago to one of our clients that. They did a rollover, and the custodian made a check payable to her, and she was under 59 and a half. So not only did she have to pay taxes, she had to pay a penalty on top of it. Yeah.
All right. So remember that. Now let's get to number 4. This is mistake number 4. A lot of people worked for a good company, had a good career, and fell in love with their company. and fell in love with their company stock. And what do we find in their 401k?
Company stock.
Now, that could be a very good thing, but it's got some downside risk.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk there. And by the way, don't forget, if you're interested in our free report, it's called The 9 Mistakes to Avoid. And if you want a free report, just send me an email or give me a phone call there. We have our information up on the screen. And we'll get that free report out to you. It's got a lot of good information on there if you're thinking about rolling over your 401k. All right, so let's get back to mistake number 4. Mistake number 4 is the company stock monster. So holding company stock inside a 401k is fairly common. However, there are really concerns to consider with this. Now, a lot of times, the reason why you have so much stock in there, it's like maybe you're buying the stock, but a lot of times when a company does a match, they match with stock. So one of the problems is overweighting. Having too much exposure in any one company inside of your portfolio adds additional risk to your nest egg. And of course, everybody remembers what happened with Enron, and this was back in the early 2000s when the company actually went bust, and the employees, of which there were many, were left with worthless stock inside their 401k.
And Enron is an extreme example, but again, going back to 2008, let's suppose you retired in 2008 and the bulk of your IRA is in a good company stock. Well, a lot of good company stocks lost half their value.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't need the money and you can wait 5 years for whatever it takes to maybe come back, it's just generally not a good idea to have money that you're going to be living on in retirement to have a huge exposure to your own company stock or to any one company stock. It's just too much risk.
Yeah, you're right. It's risk. It's company risk. It's it's stock market risk. It's sector risk. I mean, you name it.
Every risk is there.
There's risk there. So, we're not saying that you shouldn't have any stock in your 401k plan, but you just don't want to be you just don't want to be overweighted. And then of course there's another problem, which I guess in the scope of our show here today we don't want to dig too deep into this, but there's something called net unrealized appreciation, or it's the abbreviation is NUA. And what that is if you have company stock inside your plan, you have to pay very close attention, because before you touch your 401k, you actually want to sit down with an accountant or a qualified tax professional that understands the NUA. And I guess in the interest of full disclosure, you and I are not trained accountants. I mean, I do have an accounting background, but I don't practice accounting, nor am I a CPA. So we would likely steer you in the direction of tax help if we get into this, because NUA, or net unrealized appreciation, it's unlike other investments inside your company retirement plan, and shares of a company stock are actually eligible for special tax treatment after leaving your employer. So you have to really be careful with how you have to kind of tread lightly on how you unwind that. Right. As far as the company stock goes.
Yeah, and we cover this a little bit more detail in the report on the 9 mistakes you want to avoid with your 401k. Talk a little bit more about that net unrealized asset, and if you have any questions on it, give Jeff a call and you can talk about it. Now, we're coming up on mistake number 5, which is we're going to get into how you can make mistakes regarding your beneficiaries on 401ks. And this is something that we've seen time and again, a mistake that is made that can easily be avoided.
Mistake number 5 is failing to properly name your beneficiaries. So this seems so rudimentary, yet it's a very common mistake. When it comes to 401ks and your IRAs, the only thing that matters is how you completed your beneficiary form. Okay, so first of all, you want to make sure that there are beneficiaries on there, because you want to make sure that your beneficiaries are receiving the retirement account in a tax advantaged way. So that's one thing. So we want to make sure, and we do, in our practice, we do beneficiary reviews, and it as a matter of course, you know, you should be reviewing your beneficiary designation often.
I remember there was a case in New York where a woman had worked for, I think, 30, 40 years as a principal or teacher and a principal in schools, and she got it set up her retirement account when she was in her 20s, when she was single, made her mother and her sister the beneficiaries. 20 years later, she got married. Her sister died. I mean, her mother died. Her sister didn't talk to her, and then she died, and her husband couldn't get a nickel out of her retirement account. It all went to a sister that she couldn't stand and wouldn't talk to. So life changes happen, and what they say, days are long and years are short. And it's good to check these things periodically and see, well, have things changed in life, and do these things need to be updated? So now we're coming down.
So we have, life happens. Loved ones pass away. You have kids from second marriages, new grandchildren, so on and so forth. Also, be careful about leaving money to minors. You know, that there's some
Issues there.
tricks there, not tricks, but there's some traps there that you have to be careful of.
All right, now what we've seen again, this is going to be the mistake we'll talk about next, is number 6, is trying to recoup your losses, trying to chase performance, trying to get back after you've had a bad year or two or a setback, to try to overcome your losses in a 401k. How's that mistake number 6 play out?
Well, number 6, trying to recoup losses or chase performance. One thing we know for certain, the stock market's going to have ups and downs. If you happen to move your 401k during a market downswing, kind of human nature to want to try to recoup your losses, invest more aggressively. You don't want to let the emotion of a downward swing in the market allow you to veer from your financial plan and your long-term vision. So as you near retirement, you should tend to become more conservative. The money needs to last as long as you do. So you just have to be careful about letting your emotion get in the way of trying to recover these losses.
Okay, well, now let's talk about number 7, mistake number 7, which is burying your head in the sand about the whole retirement 401k process. And Jeff, you've seen this again and again, that people just kind of try to ignore what they call the elephant in the room. They're coming up maybe into their early 50s or late 40s, and they say, geez, you know, now I got to get serious.
Yeah, so if you're within 10 years of retirement, it's time to start the planning process. So we do public workshops where we talk about retirement planning, and this might be a good time to put that graphic on the screen there for our viewers. We've got a workshop coming up, and you can just call our office for tickets. But you know, we take our show on the road, so to speak, and we talk about retirement. And typically, you know, the people in our audience some of them are already retired, but a lot of people are just approaching retirement. So yeah, I mean, if you're 10 years out, I mean, it's really a good time to start planning.
Great. And okay, now getting on with the mistakes, we're up to number 8, and that's forgetting about a loan. This is serious business.
Yeah, so treating your 401k as a personal ATM machine is a mistake, and in and itself, because you are robbing yourself of your retirement dollars and their ability to work for you. But forgetting about a loan is an even bigger mistake, because if you cash in your 401k, then what will happen is that loan could be treated as taxable income. All right, so again, this is where you need some good advice. This is where you want to consult a tax professional. So if there's a loan inside of your 401k, because most 401k plans allow you to borrow money. and people do it. But when you borrow money, you're actually sacrificing your retirement income. But worse yet, it could have some tax implications.
All right, so now let's sum it up, I guess, with the biggest mistake, number 9, which is doing this whole business alone. And this is, an area where we just touched on 8 or 9 of the mistakes that people make in their 401ks. There are many more, and it's often the best thing to do is to seek out somebody who really has done this thousands of times and knows where the problems are and how to avoid them.
Yeah, so Barry, think of it this way. Building a retirement nest egg takes time to create, nurture, and develop. And we call this the first half of the game. And the distribution phase is a bit different. The distribution phase is what we call the second half of the game. And you have the challenge of having the income last the rest of your life. So, it's just we call it accumulation versus distribution. So you don't want to do this by yourself because you don't want your retirement to happen by chance. You have to have a plan. So so just to kind of wrap up today, we have this free report. It's called the 9 Mistakes to Avoid with Your 401k. If you want a copy of that report, simply give us a call or send me an email and I'll get that report right out to you. So as we bring our show today to a conclusion, Barry, I think it was good that we spent some time talking about 401ks because they're such an important part of a lot of people's retirement plan, and you want to make sure that you don't make any of these mistakes.
That's great. And folks at home, give us a call, shoot us an email. We love to hear from you. We hear from people more and more as we go along in the show, and we'll see you on the next show.